Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti, and tonight we're talking about Kenny Omega and his recent comments that he made on Wrestling Observer Radio, saying he's open to a All Elite Wrestling WWE partnership. Now, before we get to that conversation, make sure you hit subscribe and hit that bell for notifications, as we're trying to get to 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling Double or Nothing. So, Ralph, I want to start with what exactly Kenny Omega said in his comment here. He said, quote, "We have an open door to everyone. When I say everyone, I mean everyone. I wouldn't want to put the cart before the horse, but even myself, I'm completely open to working with a place like WWE." So, by seeing all this, could you actually see a partnership between All Elite Wrestling and WWE?
So in short, I actually want to say no. As much as I'd like to see this happen, and I'm sure a majority of the wrestling community would like to see this happen, I just don't see any way where this would work out for either of the companies. I'm sure in the short term, All Elite Wrestling would be privileged to work with a company like WWE, given that, they haven't really had a show yet. We don't really know too much other than the roster and the fact that they're backed by the Khan family, who has, a substantial amount of wealth, and they are going to be investing quite a bit into their wrestling company now. But other than that, I can't really see a situation that would benefit the WWE that would entice them to working with All Elite Wrestling at the end of the day. So I don't think this is actually going to happen.
Now, I agree with you. I don't think this would ever happen, but this would create such a huge whirlwind in the internet wrestling community, I think. I think a lot of wrestling fans would want this one day, some kind of big super card where the best of the best can compete one night for, I don't want to say brand supremacy like WWE uses for SmackDown versus Raw, but something similar to that. Like, who is the ultimate company? Now, like you, I agree that this would never happen, because as long as Vince McMahon is there, Vince McMahon is going to book his guys to go over 100% of the way. You saw that with the Invasion. You saw that with ECW when they had their partnership back then, and WWE had partnerships with New Japan Pro Wrestling, with AAA, any company. No one from other companies got the upper hand except for WWE. If that day comes, though, when Vince McMahon is no longer with WWE for whatever reason, can you see Triple H possibly looking into this?
I think it's much more likely if Triple H is the one who we assume ends up taking over WWE at some point down the road. I think it's more likely, given the fact that when you look back to some of the comments that Triple H has said regarding NXT and its willingness to work with other promotions outside of WWE, he's much more open to that, it seems. Now, you mentioned that, Vince may not be as willing to do something like this because he'd want his guys to get over. I mean, rightfully so, right? Because if you have All Elite Wrestling, or any wrestling promotion for that matter, come into the biggest brand like WWE, and you have their top guy beat your top guy, that's not really what's best for business for the WWE. And at the end of the day, WWE is going to do what's best for the WWE. Vince is a smart businessman. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's been able to grow his promotion from the ground up and become the largest wrestling promotion in the world without doing really any major interpromotional type stuff on a larger level. So I would think that as long as Vince is there, as long as Vince is in charge and calling the shots, we don't see this. If Triple H is the one to take over, I think it's more likely, but I still don't see it happening anytime soon.
Now, we bring up what's in it for WWE in this partnership. Obviously, for All Elite Wrestling, the exposure is very great in this, if a partnership were to ever happen. WWE, I think the only thing that this would benefit them for is basically what ECW was when their partnership happened in the mid-90s, was essentially a developmental for WWE. Or a place for some of their talent that aren't used to go to All Elite Wrestling, get some work in, and then come back and be big. That was the example for Al Snow. Al Snow was part of ECW because WWE lent him to ECW to become Al Snow after failed attempts with Leif Cassidy and Shinobi and all these other attempts that they did with Al Snow. And Al Snow even said that himself. So now we have NXT, but could you see maybe something where maybe Cody is like, okay, we're using these guys as independent, bringing them up to the big show, and then eventually they go to WWE more as a stepping stone, but not necessarily a partnership?
So you're saying All Elite Wrestling has their guys go and works in WWE and then comes back?
In a way, yes. Basically, what I'm saying is for like some younger talent, they start in All Elite Wrestling, get some work in on a big market and a big TV deal, because we know the TV deal is eventually coming, but then they use AEW to step into WWE.
Well, I think that's something that we could certainly see happen. So you're saying use AEW as a stepping stone to ultimately get to the WWE as a full-time contributor?
Correct.
I mean, that's certainly likely, but it's also likely that you see top guys from the WWE go to All Elite Wrestling. You know, the one thing that's really interesting about this is you've already seen some major guys turn down some big offers from the WWE and join All Elite Wrestling. So we saw that with Chris Jericho, we saw that with the Young Bucks, we saw it with Adam Page, and we saw it with Kenny Omega. So now that we have this other brand that's out there, granted it's still in the very early stages and we don't know what's going to happen, there's always going to be that alternative as long as it's around. They can go to All Elite Wrestling relatively as an unknown, work their way up, and go to WWE, and they can get paid more than probably they would have gotten paid, because WWE is going to try and get the best talent that there is out there. And then conversely, on the other side of that, you can have some of the bigger name guys that are already established in WWE go to All Elite Wrestling, either for creative control or more money. The two things that drive this industry, as Jim Ross puts it, is creative and cash. And, you know, the one thing with All Elite Wrestling that we know is they're going to give these guys a certain amount of creative control, and they are willing to pay some pretty big contracts. One of the things that Kenny Omega also said in his sit-down interview with Dave Meltzer was the offer that All Elite Wrestling made to him was the biggest contract I think he was ever offered. Chris Jericho said the same thing. So the fact that All Elite Wrestling is willing to pay these guys more than what the WWE is willing to pay top-notch guys that says a lot. You know, they're in it to win it. They're here to either I don't know if they always say that they're not trying to compete with WWE, but at the end of the day, when you have guys choosing between the two companies, you're almost competing against each other, and it's good for the wrestlers at the end of the day, because they can make more money in that sense.
Now, I do want to bring up something. I brought it up a little bit in our conversation earlier, and that's with Vince McMahon if he eventually leaves WWE for whatever reason. This was actually brought up in their SEC filing this week, saying that if Vince McMahon were to leave WWE, it would make big effects to the company. Here's the exact wording here. The unexpected loss of the services of Vincent K. McMahon could adversely affect our ability to create popular characters and creative storylines, or could otherwise adversely affect our operating results. In addition to serving as chairman of our board of directors and chief executive officer, Mr. McMahon leads a creative team that develops storylines and the characters for our programming and live events. From time to time, Mr. McMahon has also been an important member of our cast of performers. The loss of McMahon due to unexpected retirement, disability, death, or unexpected termination for any reason could have a material adverse effect on our ability to create popular characters. And then it goes on to say, while he has provided the company assurances that his focus on WWE will not be diverted by any of these efforts, talking about the XFL, any such diversion or perception of such diversion could adversely affect our operating results and could have a material adverse effect for our stock price. Now, the stock has never been as high as it is right now, Ralph. If McMahon leaves and it does impact the stock price like it does, people are already trying to compare AEW to WCW and being that competition to WWE. If it gets to a point where the stock drops so bad and AEW is now the leader, could you potentially see a buyout with WWE and AEW?
You're saying, will AEW buy out WWE if it gets to that point?
Yep.
I doubt it. I doubt we're ever going to see a day where WWE crumbles to the point where another company's buying it out, with or without Vince McMahon. The one thing we know about Vince McMahon is he's a very smart businessman, like I've said, and he's lining. They may not know who's going to take over the company, but he's at least got a few people there. Obviously his family, Stephanie, Shane, and Triple H, and they've all grown up in the industry. Triple H, obviously he worked in WCW, he came to WWE, married Stephanie, but not only that, his industry-related experience, look what he's done with NXT. If there's anything that suggests that the company's going to be in good hands, you can look at the body of work that Triple H has had with NXT. So whatever ends up happening with Vince McMahon, whether he ends up leaving the company or retires, whatever, the company I think is going to be in good hands, whether that's Triple H, Shane, or Stephanie. Just having those people on board, seeing what they've done in the past, I don't have any doubt that at the end of the day, this is still going to be a McMahon-owned and operated company. I don't think AEW at any point would even come close to purchasing WWE ever.
Now, we're still months away before All Elite Wrestling Double or Nothing, Ralph, and people are already saying AEW's competition. Yep. Is this too much hype, or are we literally seeing competition with All Elite Wrestling before a show has even started?
It's definitely competition to me because, what is the hottest thing in the wrestling industry? We're right around the corner to WrestleMania, and the hottest thing in WWE is probably Becky Lynch and the Ronda Rousey storyline, and I don't think that's anywhere close to the buzz and attention that All Elite Wrestling is getting right now. So that says a lot. Not only that, but we've talked about some of the top talents in the world choosing to go to this relatively unknown company, All Elite Wrestling, created by a bunch of guys who essentially were just wrestlers beforehand, and backed by a guy who never ran a wrestling promotion before. So in terms of competition, in the sense that attracting young talent, that's already there. That's already something that's happening because we see guys choosing the alternative rather than signing with WWE. And I think after Double or Nothing, we're going to know a lot more, especially once we find out what the TV deal is. These guys are competing with WWE whether they realize it or not, or whether they're willing to admit that or not. As long as they focus on what is going to work for them, I think they'll be just fine. They got a lot of talent. They got a lot of young talent. They got a lot of experienced guys that are really some of the top wrestlers in the world. So as if they continue to grow and make some smart decisions and smart investments, I think they'll be fine as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to be fine as well. It all depends on that first show. You only get one chance at a first impression. They've done great so far with their 2 rallies. The production quality has been pretty good, so that's the only thing I think is a real struggle for a new company like this, is where the production value is going to be. I think their graphics look good. I think their rally looked really good. And come May 25th, I don't want to say it automatically becomes the number 2 company in professional wrestling, but give it 6 to 12 months, and we might be talking about that, Ralph. So, only time will tell.
Yeah, like I said, after Double or Nothing, we're really going to get a sense of what this company has to offer. The interesting thing is, obviously they've been able to attract some of the top talent across the world, but some of their top guys, it's guys like Jericho, Omega, and unfortunately, we already know Cody Rhodes is injured. I just read on his Twitter that he's going to have surgery, so I don't know if that's really going to impact him wrestling at Double or Nothing, but not having him as one of their main draws, that would certainly not be a good thing. And I don't know what the health update is for Rey Fenix, but he suffered a stinger, I think, over this weekend, correct?
Yes, that was this weekend. He has a stinger, but he should be ready for Double or Nothing.
Okay. My main point with that, obviously, is if you have, let's say they have really 8 to 10 top guys, and then we know that they're trying to fill their roster with a bunch of the guys that are bigger on the independent scene, which is fine. But you have to it's going to take time to establish those independence guys as top stars. Excuse me. So when you have injuries like this to some of your top draws, like, one half of the Lucha Brothers or Cody Rhodes, that could be pretty significant, especially going into Double or Nothing.
Now, I guess the one good thing about how they're building their roster is that they're using independent guys and partnerships with independent companies. So the fact that, Ray Phoenix might be out, they can go to an independent company and say, all right, who's a good tag team that we can put in this stage? And they'll be able to replace it. Or they just signed the Best Friends. So maybe the Best Friends fill in that slot and it'd still be a good match. You have, they already invaded Bar Wrestling. They invaded Defy. They invaded Northeast Wrestling. They invaded Hell or High Water. So, and they're not going to stop with that. So I think these partnerships are more with the independent promotions and not necessarily the big guys. Like people are saying partnerships with Impact, partnerships with Major League Wrestling, Ring of Honor, New Japan. I don't see that happening. And definitely don't see WWE as we go full circle with this conversation, Ralph.
Well, yeah, I get that point. I think the point I was trying to make is, at the end of the day, the thing that's going to drive this company is ticket sales and pay-per-view sales, I'd imagine. When you have somebody like Cody Rhodes who's injured or one of the top drawers, excuse me, that's going to impact that significantly, I think.
Yeah, it definitely will. So, again, only time will tell when this show finally gets on the air and everyone's hype, speculation, and talk will finally end, and we'll see what All Elite Wrestling is all about. Ralph, thank you again for Skyping with me tonight as we were talking about Kenny Omega and saying that he's open to an All Elite Wrestling WWE partnership. If you're open to an All Elite Wrestling WWE partnership, make sure you like this video, share it on all your social media outlets, give us a subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications as we're trying to hit 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling Double or Nothing. And of course, follow us on Twitter at SCPB Podcast. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti, and thank you for listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble.